During my visit to the glorious Castle Howard in North Yorkshire, I come face to face with three strong Countesses of Carlisle who each made their mark on the history of this great estate. When I married into the British aristocracy, it was the start of a wonderfully exciting journey. But it was also a little daunting. I became a Viscountess, and for an American girl from a small town outside Chicago, that was quite a shock.
I live with my husband Luke, heir to the Earl of Sandwich, and our family at Mapperton House in Dorset.
Living in a place like this is a joy, but also a challenge. And every day we're aware that we're preserving a very special part of Britain's heritage. Mapperton has opened up an extraordinary new world for me, and I can't wait to share it with you all.
So if you love castles and manors and stately homes as much as I do, please join this American Viscountess as I journey into the British countryside in search of some of Britain's finest historic houses.
Hello, and thank you for joining me in the drawing room here at Mapperton. The reality of living in and managing historic houses has changed dramatically over the past 100 years or so. And thank goodness, the role of women in these houses has changed beyond recognition. Eleanor Brooke Peat, curator of collections and archives at Castle Howard, has studied the lives of three women in the Howard family. Three Countesses of Carlisle who each in different ways made a huge impact. These books that you've taken out of the archives today, they are from one of those strong women, aren't they?
Yeah, so she's one of my favourites. This is Isabella, and she was the second wife of the fourth Earl of Carlisle.
Right.
And they marry in 1743. His first wife had passed away sadly, as had his heirs, and so he was, was quite eager to remarry and to hopefully have another male heir. So he marries Isabella, but she's a good 20 years his younger. We don't have much in the archive surviving in terms of her correspondence, but we do have these two documents which really give a bit of an insight into what her life was like and what was she doing at Castle Howard. These are her household accounts, and she starts this in the year after she marries, so 1744, and we can see here her manuscript, I Carlisle, her book, an abstract of the house accounts. And she explains here that it's an account of the household expense during the times that they're both at Castle Howard and when they're away. And in the first few pages, she's listing all of the things that the household is spending its money on.
Right.
So from the wines that are being stocked, the beers, the meats that are brought in to feed the table. And after a few pages, it goes on for several years, it's clear she gets the idea of what she's doing. But in these first few pages, you get this sense of a young woman who's been thrust into the world of being a chatelaine, so being the head of the female head of the household, and what that role entails.
Yes, fantastic. And so this, how many years does this?
This runs up to about 1758, which is when the fourth Earl sadly passes away. So it encompasses her time here as Countess of Carlisle.
The Earl of Carlisle, her husband, dies in 1758. So how long was the marriage then?
About 15 years.
About 15 years, so not that long, but did she produce an heir?
She certainly did.
Right,
so
she did, okay. So she did her duty, which is back then was obviously very important to be able to pass on. Luckily, times have hopefully changed since then, but I know that there was, of course, that enormous pressure to be able, during that period, to be able to produce an heir so that the heir could then take on, again, historic houses like Castle Howard.
It is, and you get a real sense because she produces a couple of girls initially before she finally produces the future Fifth Earl, and you get a sense from everything else that she's doing during this time that the pressure was off then. She's produced the heir, she can now crack on with other things that she's interested in, such as redecoration and buying, you know, sort of lovely things like porcelain, adding those to the collection.
Right, and then after the death of the fourth Earl, what happened to Isabel?
Well, she ends up marrying again pretty quickly, which is a surprise. There's a lot of commentary at the time where people are admiring her as a very beautiful widow and very full of the joys of life. So she's clearly enjoying her widowhood, spending a lot of time in London. But within a year, she's remarried to Sir William Musgrave.
Okay. Does she stay here?
I think Castle Howard still remains her home. She, of course, still has her children. Her son, the future Fifth Earl, is very young. He's only 10 years old when his father dies. And so the house essentially goes into trusteeship. So she still uses it as a home, but her focus obviously turns a bit further out to the rest of the world. Now, she makes this marriage. It turns out to be quite an unwise one. They're very ill-suited in terms of their temperament. She's very outgoing and wants to, you know, enjoy life, whereas Musgrave was a bit more shy and retiring. We're not entirely sure what attracted them in the first place.
Opposites attract, maybe? I don't know, but yes,
Unfortunately, it turned out to not be one that lasted, and within 10 years, their marriage had effectively broken down, and Isabella ends up taking herself off to the continent.
And then this book to my left.
Yeah, so this is known as Isabella's recipe book. And on the front we see my book of receipts, which is a way of saying recipes.
Recipes, I know. I do love that word. I hope it comes back in fashion.
Yeah, you should just start it.
Yeah,
just keep on saying
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
And it's a really fascinating book. We think that she probably keeps this as a sort of a journal throughout her life. There's no dating within it. But it was likely started while she was still here at Castle Howard, and then she writes in French in some of the passages, so it probably continues when she's on the continent as well. But when we say recipes, that's very much, it's not just in the modern sense of recipe, if you think of a recipe for a meal, but it's also recipes for medicines. And so quite often when people were relying upon home remedies to be able to solve problems that they have. But then there are also recipes or notes relating to the household as well. So again, you get this insight, much like through the household accounts, you get this insight into what was she as a chatelaine thinking about. But to show you some of my favourite recipes, so we have here some of the medicinal ones. So you have your everyday ones, so a receipt for a cold.
Fantastic. There's snail water there. Is that right?
Snail water. I'm not sure what snail water is for.
It literally says take a gallon of milk and 100 of snails, then wash them very clean and house them. I think that says house them. Bruise them. Well done. Then put them into the milk and let them just boil up. Do we think? Yeah. Then then put them into a still, and to every still put one good handful of something mint.
Spearmint, perhaps.
Yeah, spearmint, and one handful of something hood.
Something like that.
Something like that. Must be an herb of some sort.
But then there are no instructions for what to do with it afterwards. And what are you using it for?
What is that for? Is that right? What is that for?
It's a mystery. One assumes that because there are no instructions about what to do with it next, that it must have been quite obvious what to do with it next.
Fantastic.
But then you also have for the lips, here you have essentially what's like a lip balm.
Yes.
And a cold. You know, these things have never really changed. We all have these same illnesses today and need remedies for them. So that's essentially what they're dealing with.
This is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. How fun just to go through this. Now,
if we go here, so onto our food recipes here. And It's a really interesting insight into the way that people were eating during the mid to late 18th century. All the way through here, you have a lot of preserving.
Yes,
So it's taking fruits of the seasons or you know, anything that's available and making sure that you're going to be able to fill that hunger gap during the winter and enjoy things out of season as well. So when we move through, we can see there's lots of things that are very very approachable. So you have a marmalade of quinces. You have little queen's cakes here.
Yes, lovely.
And many of these recipes are, so we've got gingerbread as well.
Yeah.
You could leave that today and you could probably reproduce that.
Yes, I do love this last one, to make cowslip wine.
There are about 5 recipes for cowslip wine in here. I can't even imagine what it tastes like, but it must have been delicious.
It must have been delicious. So thank you so much, Eleanor. And then there's a couple more strong women here that you really do focus on as well, aren't there?
There are. So Georgiana, who was the 6th Countess and joined the family around about 1801. She marries the future 6th Earl of Carlisle and comes to live at Castle Howard. And her bedroom still exists here and is still named after her even today.
Right.
So she had a huge impact on the family. And then more recently, Rosalind, the 9th Countess, who's running the house from about 1880 to 1920.
Oh my goodness. I am so incredibly lucky to film at these extraordinary historic homes across the UK, many of which are owned by individuals and families who have lived there for centuries. Their independence makes them diverse and of course offers them opportunities, but it's also hard for these lone sites to find the right expertise and money they need. The association Historic Houses helps protect these places through research, advice, marketing, and membership. When you become a Historic House member, you get a behind-the-scenes look at what it really takes to care for one of these astounding buildings. The quarterly magazine sent straight to your door and available online is packed with great features, lots of history, art, and architecture, but fun stuff and insights into a typical day in the life of an owner too. And you don't need to live in Britain to become a member. If you're viewing this outside the UK, you too can become a Historic House member and receive all the benefits I mentioned. I've set up a special code down below that can be used for international and UK membership. Do check it out. It was so interesting to see Countess Isabella's book of receipts. And it reminds me of how in my own family, Alberta, the 9th Countess of Sandwich, kept all of her recipes, and recently I've started testing them out in the kitchen, so I couldn't help but make a little request while I was at Castle Howard. I met up with Nick Howard in the private family kitchen, where he had been cooking up something rather special. So we're in your lovely kitchen, and you have recipe books surrounding you, because I had a little request, didn't I, before I came to film with you?
You did indeed. You asked me to get out Isabella, 4th Countess of Carlisle's recipe book, and I've got it. This is it all transcribed, so just more easily legible.
Yes.
Most of the recipes in here, I don't think I'd like to eat, so I'm not going to try and cook them. I mean, beef cooked for 7 hours is probably not to modern taste. And I'm not quite sure I'd find a calf's head to soak in vinegar for 7 days. So,
right, well, I'm vegetarian, so that works out really well for me.
That's perfect. So what I've found is what we would call a syllabub now, but she calls a sidibub.
Okay.
Which is reasonably amusing. And I thought that before I launched into it, I'd check with a few contemporary recipe books and see what they said about it. And quite reassuringly, the recipes are almost exactly the same, except that hers sounds slightly more delicious.
Oh, fantastic. And you sure you're not biased?
I'm sure I'm not biased. The one thing that I did get from all of them was that I probably shouldn't be using an electric mixer for it, because otherwise it would curdle. So I'm afraid I did it earlier. Here's one I did earlier.
Right, but you were
I was whisking away by hand.
So, but
I
explain
hope
to me,
it's
what
not
is a syllabub?
A
Because
syllabub is really...
as an
it's-
American, I'm not
it's
sure we
cream.
have that.
It's cream, sugar, lemon, and in this case, white wine, and she asked for sack, but you can't actually get sack anymore. It's effectively sherry. It's fortified wine.
I'm just looking here, does she put quantities in?
Yep.
Because sometimes they don't.
All the quantities in this book are for really quite large amounts. So
Right,
this one,
so-
she never says how many it's for, but this one asks for a pint of cream, half a pound of double refined sugar beaten, because of course they couldn't just go out and buy caster sugar in those days.
That's right.
Sugar came in lumps, so this
Yes,
was beaten.
yes, you had to
and,
beaten it up. Oh my
The
goodness.
juice of 1 lemon and half the rind of the same grated, half a pint of white wine, a quarter of a pint of sack. That's the sack I was talking
Yes.
about. Then she says, mix them in an earthen pan, which I'm afraid I didn't use. I used a glass bowl, with a little whisk. I had the little whisk here, in which beat it about quarter of an hour, then put into glasses. And that's pretty much what I did, having, as I say, checked through
Yes,
with the
yes.
contemporary recipes to make sure this is going to work.
Fantastic.
And to my palate, it's come out really well.
Right, well, I'm really excited to
Have a go.
have a go.
Shall we each have one? Here,
yeah.
can I offer you a spoon?
Okay, thank you.
There we are.
All right. Okay, there's a little wine in here too. Fantastic. That is absolutely delicious.
Isn't it?
I can taste the little bit of the wine, which I was hoping to taste.
But it doesn't.
But
it
it's
doesn't
not overpower.
it,
No.
The texture, the taste. It's yummy, isn't it?
You've done a fine job, Nick.
Well, I surprised myself.
Yeah, I mean, this is your next dinner party pudding. Absolutely.
Well, I think it probably will be, actually.
Yeah, it's brilliant. My goodness, this is wonderful. I'm going to have to take that recipe.
You certainly have it.
Thrilled to say that this video is sponsored by Surfshark, which has helped me so much when traveling abroad. So if you've got some travel plans coming up anywhere in the world, listen up, because you are not going to want to leave home without Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN, a virtual private network to keep your details and information safe online. And I travel out of the country about every 6 weeks, and I always use Surfshark whenever I need to get online. Anyone who tries to snoop on you, and sadly there are more and more people trying to do this, won't be able to see what you are doing or where you're doing it at all from your location. Did you know that when we connect to those public Wi-Fis at cafes, restaurants, or even public spaces, it's less safe? And therefore really important for you to use a VPN on these public networks, because it encrypts your data and keeps your details and information safe. You can even access your bank safely on those public Wi-Fis, and I feel so much better and safer when I use Surfshark. Plus, it is so easy to use. You just download the app onto your computer, and you can switch to a different IP address in a different country, which hides your own IP address from hackers, so that those hackers think you're in one country when you're not. But the big bonus for me is streaming. I can travel the world in just one click. For example, if you're traveling anywhere in the world and want to connect to an American or UK server and access the biggest movie catalog on Netflix, well, you need Surfshark. Get an exclusive holiday Surfshark deal. Enter the promo code VICOUNTESS to get up to 6 additional months for free using the link down below. In the West Wing of the house, I met up with Eleanor to hear more about Lady Georgiana, the 6th Countess of Carlisle, and her legacy to the Howard family.
So this is Lady Georgiana's bedroom.
Tremendous, beautiful. Oh my goodness. And this is the bedroom as it was, is that right?
Well, it's not far
from it.
as it would have originally been, but certainly the bed has been here since Lady Georgiana used this room.
Right.
And it's likely this was her bedroom ever since she first moved into the house. She married the future 6th Earl of Carlisle in 1801, and they move in here essentially with his parents. So the 5th Earl and Countess are living in the east wing of the house, which has always been the family wing. And this is a relatively newly created suite of rooms in the west wing. You know, the west wing had only been completed towards the end of the 18th century. these rooms have been fitted up, and they use these as their private suite.
I see. How wonderful. So this is Georgiana. Now tell me a little bit about her background, because she did come from quite a significant family, is that right?
She did. So her parents were the 5th Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. You know, and there's been a very famous book and a film about them. They had quite an exciting lifestyle and were very much the centre of fashionable life of the Ton, or in London. And she was their eldest daughter. She's also known as Little G for much of her life. And she's actually very different to her parents. You know, her mother, the Duchess of Devonshire, is known as a great beauty and socialite.
Yes.
You know, really outgoing. Little G seems to have reacted slightly against that and becomes quite a quiet, withdrawn young lady, quite pious, but hugely intelligent and interested in the world around her, particularly in politics. She ends up meeting her husband, the future 6th Earl of Carlisle, and whilst it was, you know, it turns out to be a great love marriage, it is also, you know, a great political alliance as well between
absolutely.
two of the big families of the time, you know, uniting Chatsworth and Castle Howard, you know, two of the significant houses and families in the country together.
Yes, absolutely. And was she a beauty like her mother as well?
I'm not sure she was really, and we don't actually have very many, you know, likenesses of her surviving. You know, particularly of her as a younger woman.
Right.
And we have surviving in this room one of her at one end of her life. So this is her as a great matriarch.
Yes.
You know, really sort of seen here in her widow's weeds. It's painted in the 1850s, following the death of her husband. And, you know, she at this point really is the head of a large family. So she and the 6th Earl have 12 children together, which, you know, is a huge family. And quite often people would have these big families because sadly some children wouldn't survive infancy. You know, infant mortality was sadly quite high. But all 12 of their children survive, and all of them go on to make, you know, really good marriages. So, you know, that essentially is her role, is to produce these children, but then also make sure that they marry well, and you have this enormous extended family. We have a huge archive still surviving of her correspondence with her extended family, particularly still with her mother and with her sister as well. So she's very involved in the life of her family around her.
Right.
And we get a lot about what are her interests. You know, she was a great musician. She loved writing and playing music. She's also interested in politics, so she spent a lot of time in London with her husband, who was a politician.
Yes.
You know, visiting the House of Commons and really entrenching herself in that life. And she's a very learned woman as well.
Yeah.
So she's a really interesting sort of beacon of what a woman could be at that time.
It's really fascinating for me to hear how these women were such strong characters of their time and how each left their own mark on the history of Castle Howard. Rosalind Stanley married George Howard, the future 9th Earl of Carlisle, in 1865. She was a campaigner for the temperance movement and cheerleader for women's suffrage. But at Castle Howard, she took on the estate management as well as transforming much of the interior decoration. This room is all about the 9th Countess, is that right?
It is, Rosalind, and can't really overstate the amount of impact she had on Castle Howard in many different ways, but particularly on its decorative history.
Right. And is it fair to say that the wallpaper here is her? I mean, and she was kind of everywhere with wallpaper. Is that right?
It is. And wallpaper's something, you know, she really used wallpaper throughout the house. Now, we know wallpapers are being used at Castle Howard as a form of decoration since the very earliest days. But by the time you get into the later 19th century, it's no longer a preserve of the very wealthy. It's become much more ubiquitous.
Right.
And it's very fashionable to use it. When she and the 9th Earl, her husband, move in here in 1880, they find a house that is perhaps a little bit tired. They comment that they really need to make things shipshape.
Right.
And improve the appearance of the place, and she really chooses wallpaper to do that with. So over the next 20 years, we see an enormous amount of change through pretty much every single interior of the house. Rosalind sets out initially with her interest in the Orient, so particularly Japan. There's a great craze for Japanese furnishings and decoration during the second half of the 19th century, and she's very much into that. And so in the first 10 years or so of them being at Castle Howard, we see an awful lot of Japanese wallpapers being used. And the one that we have here in the Archbishop's bedroom is one of the ones that survives. And this is an incredible wallpaper. You know, it really hits you in the face when it comes through the room, and it's still, even 140 years after it was installed, it still has that amazing impact. But we also have a huge collection of wallpapers in store here. So we have surviving papers on the walls, which is a wonderful thing, but we also have them in store left over from all of her decoration projects. And so we have here a roll of this wallpaper, the goose paper.
Oh my goodness.
And this shows us you know, the original colours of the paper. Now you think this has been on the walls for 140 years. Whilst this is quite a dark room, it has of course faded from light damage. It's you know, it's collected sort of pollution on the surface from open fires. And the colours have changed quite radically, and you've lost particular colours like these lighter greens and the yellows and the purples, and the pinks have faded away. So it's amazing to be able to hold this up against the original
It is,
wallpaper.
because of course this is much more vibrant, but it has been stored away for 140 years. But when you see this, just like this, you can imagine what it was like coming in here and having this sort of wonderful, bright wallpaper, and really cheery. It's very cheery.
It is, and I think she chose this very purposely because this is quite a dark room. We're east facing here, so you don't get a lot of direct sunlight during the day. So she's purposely chosen this really rich and vibrant wallpaper to brighten up the room. And also, if you look very closely, you can just see sort of sparkling on the surface there. It's a graphite or a mica layer that's been included over the top, which again, you know, if you've got candlelight or the light of the fire, it would catch those little sparkles and again help to bring an element of brightness to the room.
And then here, my eye was brought to the attention of Castle Howard wallpapers.
Yes, so this is an amazing document that survives in the archive. This is a notebook that Rosalind starts in 1905, and she's literally listing all of the elements of the house, such as wallpapers, fabrics, beds, mattresses, toilet services, you name it, she's listed it in here.
So she really was, in one sense, what we would call an interior designer in today's terms.
Yeah, and she's thinking about things very holistically about the house. It's all being brought in. But the most important page, to my mind, is this, which lists all of the wallpapers around the house, and she's listed all of the rooms, the type of wallpaper that they have in there, and then also notes about how much is left over and what they have in store. Now, some of these are you know, sort of, we help to connect to wallpapers that are still on the walls. So we can see down here we have West Wing, Japanese paper, Wild Goose. So that's where we are at the moment.
And she even lists sort of the pieces: 1 piece, 3 piece, 3 pieces of 24 yards, 1 piece, 6 rolls. I mean, it's really meticulous. But I also have spotted Morris.
Yes. So William Morris is her other great love. So from after her Japanese phase, we start to see William Morris designed wallpapers sneaking into Castle Howard. And this background relationship with William Morris comes partly from their close friendship with him. So Rosalind and her husband George were good friends with both William Morris and other members of the arts and crafts movement and the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood as well. And
fantastic.
I mean, you get a sense from this list here just how many different Morris papers are being used. For example, in the Long Gallery, that was decorated in a red sunflower paper. So completely transformed the space, and it took 170 rolls to be able to do that work. But surprisingly, none of that survives in the archive. Although recently, when we were pulled out one of the bookcases, we were able to find these small scraps hidden behind a bookcase. So this is all that we have remaining of that very particular point. in the decorative history
Right,
of
right.
the Long Gallery. But still, you know, an amazing survival.
Yes, amazing survival, and just to be able to see that the red sunflower right there.
Over here on the right-hand side, we have a picture of the music room, looking very different to how it looks now. And we can see in this black and white image, it's a very heavy wallpaper that you can see on the walls. But you can also see where the light touches it down the side that it's got a good shine to it. Now, when you look really closely at this with a magnifying glass, you can make out that there is the pattern there, and that pattern matches in with this wallpaper. Now we have, you know, this is an amazing green and gold wallpaper with this incredible, you know, folia and cherub pattern on it. And we have huge numbers of rolls of this paper still surviving in the archive. And it was there up until the fire, we think, in 1940. The music room is next door to the room, the last room that was damaged directly by fire. If you think there's a fire raging next door, there's going to be a lot of water coming into the house. So some of the rolls that we have surviving in the archive do have water damage on them. So they were clearly stripped out immediately following the fire, and good old Castle Howard fashion got wrapped up and put into store. So we're incredibly fortunate.
Oh my gosh,
that
yes
was
you
done.
are. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Eleanor, for sharing these 3 strong women and their stories here at Castle Howard. And it must be just wonderful to be able to continue to research them, but see them and the legacy that they've left all around Castle Howard.
No, it is absolutely. I mean, sort of Isabella, Georgiana and Rosalind, they're such strong personalities and have impacted on the house in all of their different ways. And, you know, it's so often we talk about the men of the house and the things that they're doing, which might be more outwardly preserved around us, but the impact of women should never be overlooked in the history of the house. They're keeping things running in the background, and they always have their own interests and their own impacts, but it's a story that is still worth, you know, very much focusing on.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. What an absolute joy to visit Castle Howard. It was so amazing to step inside its history. From the restoration following the devastating fire in 1940, to its legendary appearances on screen, the renewal of the interior decoration, together with the repairs needed to the buildings across the estate, and of course, the impact of Countesses Isabella, Georgiana, and Rosalind. It's been an absolutely fascinating journey, and I hope to return to Castle Howard once more. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you soon for more historic house visits. Until then, bye everybody!